Good Friday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for December the 22nd. Today we are reading together in Esther chapter 3. Yesterday we read the first couple of chapters of Esther, which lays the scene for what this text is all about. Remember, this might be the last reading in what we might call the historical portion of the Old Testament, telling a lot of narrative portions of the story of Israel. But this is at least in the way our arrangement is. But it's definitely not the last chronological portion of the story. That would probably be what happens at the end of Nehemiah. But this portion of Israel's history, which probably sits somewhere in the time frame between Ezra chapter 6 and Ezra chapter 7, tells us about those who are living in the fortress of Susa, which is the capital city of the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians, Persia and Media. And it tells the story about these Jews that are there, and a little foreshadowing if you've never read Esther before. So please forgive me for a little bit of this spoiler alert. But they are on the brink of extinction. There's a man that we're going to be introduced to today, Haman, who concocts a plan with King Ahasuerus' approval that the Jews on a particularly appointed day are going to be killed. And this tells us how, thankfully, that does not happen, because, of course, that would be big time bad. But we'll read about the plan today, and that'll set us up for the story progressing forward about how, thankfully, that does not come to pass. Remember that God is not mentioned explicitly within the text of Esther. There is no word for God, Elohim. There is no covenant name for God mentioned, Yahweh. The Tetragrammaton is not found within the text of Esther, yet we can certainly see his fingerprints all over the text and all over the story. And just our job to try to see that and understand how he's continuing to work even within this particular chapter of his people's history. So let me get the text on the screen for us of Esther chapter 3, and we will read along together here. Esther chapter 3, verse number 1. After all this took place, King Ahasuerus honored Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite. He promoted him in rank and gave him a higher position than all the other officials. The entire royal staff at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, because the king had commanded this to be done for him. But Mordecai, remember the Jew we were introduced to, Esther's legal guardian, Mordecai would not bow down or pay homage. The members of the royal staff at the king's gates asked Mordecai, "Why are you disobeying the king's commands?" When they had warned him day after day, and he still would not listen to them, they told Haman in order to see if Mordecai's actions would be tolerated, since he had told them he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai was not bowing down to him or paying homage to him, he was filled with rage. And when he learned of Mordecai's ethnic identity, it seemed repugnant to Haman to do away with Mordecai alone. So he planned to destroy all of Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout Ahasuerus' kingdom. In the first month, the month of Nisan, in King Ahasuerus' 12th year, the pur, that is the lot, was cast before Haman for each day in each month, and it fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar. Then Haman informed King Ahasuerus, "There is one ethnic group scattered throughout the peoples in every province of your kingdom, keeping themselves separate. Their laws are different from everyone else's, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If the king approves, let an order be drawn up authorizing their destruction, and I will pay 375 tons of silver to the officials for deposit in the royal treasury." The king removed his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. Then the king told Haman, "The money and people are given to you to do as you see fit." The royal scribes were summoned on the 13th day of the first month, and the order was written exactly as Haman commanded. It was intended for the royal satraps, the governors of each of the provinces, and the officials of each ethnic group, and written for each province in its own script, and to each ethnic group in its own language. It was written in the name of King Ahasuerus and sealed with the royal signet ring. Letters were sent by couriers to each of the royal provinces, telling the officials to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jewish people, young and old, women and children, and plunder their possessions on a single day, the 13th day of Adar, the 12th month. A copy of the text, issued as law throughout every province, was distributed to all the peoples so they might get ready for that day. The couriers left, spurred on by royal command, and the law was issued in the fortress of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to drink, while the city of Susa was in confusion. And that is the text of Esther chapter 3. Again, we're introduced to the bad guy, basically, here within the text of Esther. His name is Haman, and he has just recently been promoted to one of the highest positions within the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians. What is interesting about Haman is that he's described as the son of an Agagite, or Agagite. And we're not for certain exactly what this means. Some would say that this is just describing him as being from a particular city within the Medes and Persians kingdom. But others suggest and think that more likely this man is of Canaanite descent, that he could even be related to the Amalekite king Agag, which was a historical enemy of the Israelites. He was one of the ones responsible for Saul's downfall. So there's a lot of history here, it seems, there's a lot of history that could be connected between this man Haman and his eventual, we're going to note here, an enemy in Mordecai. So the big deal with Haman, and this is happening probably about 5 years after King Esther has become queen. That happened in the 7th year of Ahasuerus's reign, and this all takes place, the text tells us, in the 12th year. Excuse me. So about 5 years later, Haman is elevated to this high position, and the king says that those who are around him are to bow down and pay homage to Haman. This was the king's command. This is not something that Haman came up with. This is something that the king commanded to be the case. Now, the issue from Mordecai's perspective, because Mordecai doesn't doesn't go along with this. The rest of the people within the king's let's see here, the members of the royal staff at the king's gate, they all follow this. They all will bow down and pay homage to Haman. But Mordecai doesn't do this, and we're not exactly sure why. Again, the narrator doesn't give us all the details here, and the narrator also doesn't tell us whether this was something that Mordecai should have done or should not have done. All we're given is the fact that he doesn't do it. But what we might speculate is because Mordecai knows the background of Haman, and he knows the disdain that exists between the Jews and Haman's descendants. Is that why? Is Haman following his conscience in thinking that I'm not going to bow down and worship to a man, only God is worthy of bowing down in worship? Maybe that's what's going on. Whatever the case might be, Mordecai is not following along with the rest of the crowd whenever Haman comes around and bowing down in homage to him. His friends, again, the members of the royal staff, I would assume these are friends of some sort. They warn him. It seems like they're trying to keep Mordecai out of trouble. They don't want him to be punished. They don't want any issue to occur, which makes it interesting to me that after they warn him a bunch of times, they then kind of snitch on him. They tell Haman about this. They told Haman in order to see if Mordecai's actions would be tolerated, since he had told them that he was a Jew. So it's just very interesting that they warn him to try to keep him out of trouble, and then they're the very ones that get him into trouble. because it doesn't seem, as best I could tell, that Haman really was paying that much attention to what was going on until it was brought to his attention. So once he finds out that Mordecai doesn't pay him the homage that he feels like he deserves, and that really, in fairness, has been commanded by the king, he becomes very mad at this. He feels disrespected, kind of like how Ahasuerus felt disrespected by Vashti earlier on in the story of this text. Um, so in accordance with what we've seen so far from the Persians, uh, Haman like goes completely overboard. He has this incredible overreaction that, I could just kill Mordecai, but why would I kill Mordecai whenever I can kill his entire people? Because he's found out that Mordecai is a Jew. He's one of the foreign peoples that's been brought in to the kingdom. So what he does is he rolls the dice, which is known as pur, which is going to come into play later on with the feast that's going to be associated with this once this all works out for the Jews' favor in Purim. But he rolls the pure, which is kind of like a dice, casting lots, and it falls on the 12th month of Adar. Well, why has he done this? Well, he's done this to figure out which month he wants to carry out this plan. And his plan is presented to King Ahasuerus, and he tells him about how there is a group of um, a group of people within his kingdom that, they're different. They have different types of laws, traditions, religion. They don't just completely assimilate into the people. I think they're really a lot of trouble, and it's going to be in the best interest of the king not to tolerate them. He's really playing on Ahasuerus's fears, because remember, Ahasuerus spent the first 2 to 3 years of his reign kind of having to put out the fires of various rebellions around. So now Haman's almost presenting this out as being, well, here's the rebellion right here in on your own front porch. It's in your front yard. You need to take care of this. And if you let me do this, and if you let me bring this people to destruction, then I'll also give 375 tons of silver to the officials to deposit in the royal treasury. More than likely, it seems, the money that I'm going to take from all these dead Jews, I'm going to give to you now. So this is really an extermination plot in every way. And unfortunately, the king buys into it. And he says, hey, the money and the people, they're yours. You do with it as you seem fit. And, there's a possibility here that there's a wink, wink from Ahasuerus that, yeah, I better get some of that money that you're going to be able to gain from all this. So the scribes are called forth, and they are to write out this law, this declaration about what's going to take place. It's written to all the different people in all the different provinces and all the different types of languages, and they were sent by couriers to each of these places. And the basic premise of the letter is that on the 13th day of the 12th month, all of you are to destroy, kill, and annihilate the Jewish people. All the people were invited to participate in this plan being carried out, which is just, it's just mind-boggling to me to think about that. To think about, you have this neighbor that is a Jew, and you've been neighbors with them for who knows how many years, and everything's been fine. They've been respectful to you. You've been respectful to them. You've had interactions with them, but now you get this letter, and it's certainly going to be described as confusion is what is brought upon all of Susa, and maybe this confusion is completely is seen in all the different places around the land. But there's this confusion of, why do I have to kill him now? What is this seemingly random edict that I now have to kill my neighbor and exterminate my neighbor simply because he's a Jew? Of course, our own history in Germany in the Holocaust in the mid 20th century, I mean, a lot of that comes to mind with all this, considering the people involved in everything. But it's just a mind-blowing thing to consider. And yet this is Haman's plot. Because one man did not give him the respect he believed he deserved, right or wrong from Mordecai's position, Again, one of the things that I mentioned in my study Bible is that a Jewish person was not forbidden by scripture or cultural custom to bow down to a person in authority. But that's just not something that Mordecai was willing to do here, probably for conscience sake, for whatever reason. But because of his single decision to do this, Haman blows up, overreacts completely, and is going to take out an entire population of the entire population of the Jewish people within the kingdom of Persia and Media. So it's just you got to think this is a major crossroads for the Jewish people. Are they all going to be killed? Yes, some of them have gone back to the promised land at this point. They've gone back to Jerusalem and Judah, but is that it? Are those all that are going to be able to return? Because are the rest of them, the rest of those in Susa and in Babylon and all these other places, are they going to be exterminated? If we've never read Esther before, and we don't know how the story plays out, we might be really concerned and should honestly be very concerned for the people. What's God going to do to protect his people? What's he going to do to protect the remnants? Well, that's what we'll notice as we go through the rest of this text, reading chapter 4 tomorrow, where Mordecai gets involved and makes a very strong appeal to Esther and makes probably what is the most well-known statement within the entire text of Esther. Again, not mentioning God specifically, but very strongly alluding to him and what he is doing for his people during this time. If you have any questions or comments about the text of Esther chapter 3, please feel free to leave that in the comment section below. And I appreciate you taking some time to read along with me on this Friday. Hope you have a great rest of your Friday, and hope you'll tune back in again tomorrow as we read together from Esther chapter 4 together. Take care, and God bless.